we'll throw a little bit more esoteric history in. In Egypt, there was a city on the delta of the Nile River that became the center of a lot of this. It was called, at various times, On, that became Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and eventually Alexandria. And the word On, actually meant light. And in the Bible, where it's mentioned the plains of what we would call in English Sharon, S-H-A-R-O-N. And there was an Israeli prime minister named Sharon. Okay, Sharon. That's the origin of the word, which actually was Shah. Let me remember this. Yeah, Shah was an orbit of the sun, or an annual orbit. Ra was the sun god Ra, and On was the level or the plane of the sun. I mean, not the sun, of the light. So Shah Ra On, or Sharon, is basically a dimensional plane that the elite and the initiates would go to once they had gone through their 12 years of the left eye and the right eye of Horus, and they would ascend to the planes of Sharon, or the orbital plane, where they would interface with the template of how the world system would be constructed over the linear construction of time. The way they got there was they used this little thing called white powder gold, or monoatomic gold, that was created by the crucible of using intense heat and electrical pressure that was ultimately personified, if you will, in something called the Ark of the Covenant. That was the covenant, and the let me see. It's been a long time since I talked about this. Oh, I know, it was a Shem On Na. Na, remember, means bridge. On, or Anu. Shem was the fruit, or the bread that enabled you to rise to the plane of On, to meet On, or Anu, and receive the information or the download of the light. So Shem On Na was the bridge to the light, or the bridge to Anu, or the bridge to heaven, which that became mana. So the fruit of the gods, or the bread of the gods, as mana, was actually monoatomic gold, which was consumed and was part of the final initiation. And when the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid was opened for the first time by Carter, who was the archaeologist who opened it up and discovered it, they found piles of white powder that they didn't know what it was. And there was also another archaeologist named Petrie, who around 1900 in the Sinai desert found this elevated plain, or not elevated plain, elevated plateau, but it was a peak above the plain of the Sinai desert, and found a temple and scientific construction that basically was a crucible of how to create monoatomic gold. Anybody not know what monoatomic gold is? Basically, it's singular atoms, monoatomic, single atoms. And when you take aggregate metallic gold and you heat it under certain conditions of pressure, temperature, and time, it will separate and turn into a white powder. And it becomes singular atomic. It's not metal anymore, it's a powdery substance. And when you're in the process of heating it, at a certain point it goes into a glowing state, and that color of that glow is crimson purple. That's why the royal color is crimson or purple. That's why, you know, purple or crimson, the red carpet, crimson, royal purple, because the initiates were able to create the monoatomic, or not the initiates, the masters, and then it was initially fed. The last initiation of an initiate who went through the left eye and the right eye of Horus for 24 years was taken into the king's chamber and was placed there and would consume a quantity of the monoatomic white powder and would elevate the consciousness or awareness to that plane of Shara-on and receive the download of what his program was in order to participate in the elite program to construct the world system. Okay, so when it would glow, that color, that crimson purple color, the Egyptian word for that is phoenix. So that is the phoenix rising from the ashes, so that you take gold, the aggregate gold, and you transform it by alchemy to the white powder that was known in the Middle Ages as the philosopher's stone, turning base metal into gold. It was really turning aggregate metallic gold into white powder so that you could open up your genetics to be one of the initiated or one of the elite, to be able to access that plane of Sharon. Okay, so that's where we get the word mana and Sharon. So once an initiate had achieved that, they had one last task to do, which was to, in one of the temples, there was a chamber that would be filled with water, and in that water were a bunch of crocodiles. And you had to have enough control of the physical to be able to dive into that water with very hungry crocodiles and pass through that and come out the other side. Once you did that, you were then anointed with the fat of the crocodile, which in the Egyptian language is the word Mesa. That's where the word Messiah comes from. Okay? Anointed with the Messiah or the fat of the crocodile once you had achieved the capacity to control the physical and to raise yourself up to that level of awareness to be able to access the basically the template of the pre-programmed design of the world system as I've been describing today. So that's where the phoenix rising from the ashes come from. That's where the word Messiah comes from. Where anointed, that later in Greek became Christos. So a Christos is one who simply rises above that mass hallucinatory consensus reality that's all fiction or illusion and steps out of the realm of the dead into the land of the living, or rebirths oneself into the book of life. So this is the deeper levels of what's communicated in the Bible below the superficial story of what the Romans constructed to be a control mechanism or a way to bond the minds of men to believe that the only way you could step into the book of life was the way they constructed it, and controlled by the intercessory, being the priest who controlled the law and the binding of that, as we've discussed all of today. So this is a bit of breaking down some of the constructs of what is normal religious structure, and of course now all of the churches and the religions, or let's just say the churches, not every single one, but most of them, agree, just as we've agreed, to become a franchise or a corporate subdivision of the bankrupt United States by becoming a 501c corporation. And churches themselves can walk out of the land of the dead, or the realm of the dead, into the land of the living by leaving that commercial corporate bonding construct, and as a body rise up and leave that polarized system and rise into the book of life and become whole. No, actually the Catholic churches are corporation soul. Okay. Now if you go onto into a dictionary, even a regular dictionary or a law dictionary, It'll define, for example, the word ecclesiastical or ecclesiastic as being a Christian church, but it's not a Christian church. The word ecclesia is simply the body of the congregation, the corpus, the living body of life, as opposed to the dead fictions that we're talking about. That's why ultimately the whole system is constructed to be an ecclesiastical body. Everything in law and everything in political structure is essentially religious. For example, if you look in a law dictionary, the word metropolitan. Anybody know what a law dictionary defines metropolitan as? It's defined as a title of the archbishop. And if you then go to the next entry, metropolitan police is defined as the police department of New York City. So you would think St. Louis is a metropolitan, Los Angeles a metropolitan. There's only one metropolitan, which is the Archbishop of New York, okay, who controls the ecclesia, or the corporate body. Remember Captain Kirk controlling the church, controlling enterprise or commerce? All of those bodies who are bonded to the commercial construct. It's the Archbishop through the metropolitan construction, and there is only one police department, which is the Metropolitan Police, which is New York City, which New York is what? The Empire State. Now it's the Empire State because obviously it's the Roman Empire, but how did it become the Empire State? Well, in the 1870s, as everything was being moved into what we know post-Civil War, there was something passed called the Judicature Acts. The Judicature Acts essentially fused law and equity. Equity is the private chamber of the chancery or the chancellor out of the office of the exchequer to settle claims and controversies that have substantive value as opposed to simply in law. Law is simply common law and the basics of that. And so in the 1870s, they began to move everything into the civil construct. So the Judicature Acts fused law and equity to create civil code. And in New York, those Judicature Acts were attached to the metropolitan city jurisdiction of New Orleans. Why New Orleans? I'm glad you asked that. Because remember 1803, Louisiana, St. Louis, Louisiana, at the delta of the Mississippi River, which is right over there by the two pillars in the ark, was sold in something called the Louisiana Purchase, which was gold given by the United States to who? To Napoleon. And we were taught in school that the Louisiana Purchase included all this land that we're standing on, right? All of Middle America, all through Kansas and Missouri and all around where we are. But all that land was actually recognized as being owned by a nation called the Washita, which were a black race that had been here continuously in America for 6,000 years and have a continuous history of that and were well recognized by the United States and prior to the United States in the 1700s as a sovereign nation. But the metropolitan city, Washita, similar to Wichita, Kansas, that's a Washita name. But the Louisiana Purchase was the purchase of the metropolitan city of New Orleans, which was in 1803, and Napoleon was just finishing the writing of something called the Napoleonic Code, which was an integration or consolidation of Roman civil law. So we know Louisiana is the only state that has civil law as opposed to common law, but actually all the corporate system is all Roman civil. Because the Judicature Acts of New York attached the Roman Empire to New York through the metropolitan jurisdiction of New Orleans, which was and is a United States territory by legitimate purchase. So New Orleans has always remained United States federal territory, and that's how Roman civil law through Napoleonic Code was brought onto the land and the waters of America. 40, 50 years later, a case was settled when a boat went aground up the Mississippi, and they brought admiralty ingress into the land, and then all the other stuff they did. You know, the Navy went and put high water marks at the top of the mountains and things like that to bring us under the water of commerce. So that's how civil code or civil law or commerce was brought onto the land. And the Holy See is the judicature or the judiciary of the global estate, under which are the inferior courts of civil and commercial, which basically is to control the civil body or the civitas, as I described earlier. So let's go to some questions. You want to start passing the mic around, and then I'm going to answer some questions, and then we're going to go into specific functions for the last, say, 40 minutes of until 6 o'clock, and talk about Panta, the construction of the society, talk about the ecclesiastical court or the court of the ecclesia, and what we've done specifically to establish uncontestably and irrevocably Panta and its court as a peer society on a global scale, and give us equal capacity for our private society, equal to everything that I've just described as the ecclesia, the metropolitan, and all the rest of it. Because there's precedent, and I'll go into that, of what a society is, what an ecclesia is, which is simply a body, the body of the congregation. Has nothing to do with whether it's religious or Christian or what have you. And we are basically an ecumenical society, which means universal. It means anybody with any belief, faith, or whatever is welcome within our society, except for one exception, which is anybody who persists in going to war or doing violence or harming another being or another one's property, which are the basis of common law.
Ken, I got a question. Do you believe that the Anunnaki's still around? They're still here?
Do I believe the Anunnaki are still around? Yes, no, and maybe. That gets into a whole long story that we're not going to get into today as to where they really came from, who they are, who are the Sumerians, who are the Syrians, who are the Draconians, the multidimensional or interdimensional existences and beings. But let's just say this. Long ago, we were vastly larger multidimensional beings and universes than we are today. Through all the separation that I've described, that we've externally manifested as the world system, we basically collapsed ourselves into the singularity of a physical, dense, condensed reality, and basically express the maximum separation from who and what we really are. Before we reached that maximum level of density, there was interdimensional fluidity, so to speak, where multidimensional beings or other races, whether they're reptilian, draconian, Syrian, or what have you, were able to come in and out of this dimension. And so they did progressively, as the Anunnaki or many other guises, come into this dimension and continue to wow and mystify the mere mortals, the humans, and create that sense of God's up there and we mere mortals down here, and for us to agree to bond ourselves to the law of the priest and to allow the king to lift us off the land and put us into his containment field called the civitas, the civil body, and bond us and bind us by our own consent to the codes and statutes that we're talking about today. So are the Anunnaki still around? Well, their constructions are, but we contracted and agreed to that. Can they come into this dimension anymore? No. Are the ones that are still here amongst us? Yes. Are we all in this together? Yes. So that way, ultimately, there are no enemies. We're all here by our own collective construction, and there is only one dividing line as far as I'm concerned. Those who are aligning with life will be progressively more and more supported, hence walking into life and becoming one and equal with life, versus those who are choosing the negative path, the what we would call evil path, the life-destroying path. I mean, obviously, they're getting more and more extreme in their willingness to destroy all life in order to own and control it. But that is imploding on themselves and itself at this point. So the essential construct of the Anunnaki is here, yes, and at the same time, no longer, and it doesn't matter. What we have is what we've got, and we've got to deal with it. There's more to that story, but not for today.
Okay, my question is, what would it look like if we are successful with the status of correction? As a result of that, maybe you can give some examples what we can or cannot do after we succeeded with that change. And also, I wonder how would our government would see or consider the people who have the state of correction after we change it. Do you have some kind of insight on that?
Sure, yeah. Good question. Correction, though, it's not our government. But the government, how would they see it? 2 years ago, the Pope, almost to the day, a little week or so longer than 2 years, issued a letter called an apostolic letter, a motu proprio, which means my declaration, by his absolute authority. Because in the lineage of the office of the papacy, the Pope is absolute within the realm that he controls through the Vatican and the Holy See and the judicature and everything else that is part of the hierarchy pyramidal structure. So his word is law in that system. And he issued this letter that basically said that, and I'm paraphrasing, it's been a year and a half since I read it, but basically anybody within my domain who continues to cause harm by economic, help me, somebody out there may know this better than I.
Well, didn't he just remove any immunity for any officials under the Roman Curia?
Yeah, so, essentially. Under the Roman Curia, which is the Roman court, which is the Holy See, all officers or agents, which is everybody in every national government, state government, municipal government on the planet, immunity is removed for somebody not following the law. Okay, because that's what they are all doing. Because at a certain point, decades ago, they did follow the law until the people started learning the law and forcing them to abide by it and stay within the bounds and constraints of what controlled public officers at every level, all the way to the national and the international level. And 2 years ago, he issued that letter and basically said that all of those officers holding public office are removed from blanket immunity, which gives us and which leads to the answer of the question, where is enforcement? So to answer the other part of the question, then I'll come back to enforcement. Basically, the status correction course that we have developed in Pantera and under Gemstone in the process goes through systematically. There's essentially 4 layers of correcting your status. One is to prove your life, claim your life, which we've established by documents and private trust documents that are non-grantor, non-indenture style contract form within the court of the Ecclesia as a living court, a court of sovereigns who have under a private society that has been noticed and accepted by every level of the world system, is cognized or recognized by that system, because we don't ask permission. We don't need them to send a paper back saying, yeah, we agree, or we give you our permission. We just gave them notice and gave them an opportunity to say, no, you don't have that authority, and they didn't. And so, so our court has standing. It's a court of living beings. And so you come into the court as a member of Pantera and you do several things. You create a foreign trust to move the right, title, and interest of the franchise into that foreign trust. And then you create the beneficiary of that foreign trust, which is an inter vivos trust. Inter vivos means amongst the living. So amongst the living, you step in and you prove your life. You claim it, you embody it, you prove it. You appoint an executor to the office of the estate or the office of executor to take control of the estate. You claim the estate per the vis-a-vis Act. And then step 2 is to have the office of the executor move to accept any bona fide claims and liabilities against the estate through the franchise. The franchise is the holder or the debtor holding all the bonded securities against the value of the estate. Same thing as if I own this building or I own a home and I want to encumber it or lien it with a mortgage, then that's a liability, okay, against the value of the real value of the home or the building. So consider the underlying estate, the building, the value, and the secured, bonded, certificated debt in the name of the franchise as the debtor, underwritten by the Social Security account as the liabilities. There can be perfected liabilities that we've already accepted, or contingent claims as contingent liabilities of an offered contract. So we have to clear the past of any existing liabilities and/or pending processes in commerce as claims against the franchise. So that's step number 2. 3 is rescind and revoke the contract, sever the attachment. Plus take the inter vivos trust and other documents that we've created and notify proper levels of the system that you have been recognized by a living court as having proved and claimed your life, claimed the estate, appointed the executor, and all the rest of that. So that's step number 3. And 4 basically is to collapse the trust. A trust has two forms of ownership. The trustee holds legal title and the beneficiary holds equitable title. That's called a split title. You collapse the trust by merging the title. That's when the settlement of the claims against the estate are completed and you command the Bureau of Public Debt and the custodian of alien property and the Governor General of Canada, who's the trustee of North America, to basically liquidate the balance of any unseen claims and liabilities. Because what we know on the surface, mortgages and credit cards and what have you, is the very tip of the iceberg. We've been bonded and securitized like very deep, okay? But they've been trading all of that, those bonds and securities of the franchise over and over again, creating all this huge amount of off-book fiat currency that's held in various accounts throughout the world that are also being claimed at this time on the macro scale. Remember I said that the vis-a-vis Act said that if you claim your estate, prove your life, all the profits and proceeds generated against the estate during the course of when the executor controlled that estate must revert back to the man, okay? So you collapse the trust and you claim that reversionary interest back to the man, which can go into the foreign trust, the beneficiary of which is you, essentially as a corporation sole, as the inter vivos trust and everything that we've done with that. So where does enforcement come in? Now I'm going over this very quickly, and you know, I'll fill you in over the next 45 minutes and then we'll take a dinner break, and then I've been told we have this place till midnight. We can go later if you want. But for those who may be leaving, you know, at the 6 o'clock break, let's cover all this in the nuts and bolts of it. Yeah, we all know they have the guns and all the rest of it. But at this point, in the quantum level, the world is transforming itself at every possible level of our existence. Okay, it is rippling through the quantum of the physical realm, the socio-political realm, and all the rest of it. It is transforming and transmuting into a new reality. At the same time, the old one is holding on tenaciously, and obviously there's a few parties that are not real happy about that, because they were born into a state of being of the elite and told from birth onward, you are the masters of the universe and you're going to inherit and control this world. And they're not real happy about having that pulled out from under them. And quite frankly, I don't give a shit. That's their problem, because ultimately, in the last year and a half, since 2012, December 21st, you know, we didn't go anywhere. It wasn't the end of the world. It was simply the end of a cycle. And in the original construct of what I called the plane of Charon, or that point that they raised up by the rising of the phoenix. And by the way, did anybody watch the 2012 Olympics in London? In the closing ceremonies, they had the phoenix rising up, okay? The reason I told you about the story of On, O-N, as meaning the light, the artificial light, not the light against the dark of the Set Osiris construct, not the light of supposedly the living light. It's all an artificial construct. It's all miasm or maya or illusion, false play across the screens of our minds that we've accepted and so forth. But the reason I told you about On, which of course can be translated as Lucifer and all the rest of that, is, did you notice that Babylon has the word on at the end? Baby, on, L as in, like in French, the article, the on, baby the light. Remember, Akhenaten went east to Babylon, and Mary Taten went west to London, which is La'an Da'an, the light of the light. That's where these names come from. You know, it's all Luciferian, if you will. It's all about the light. It's all about the false construct of light against dark, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, that plane that they would go to in the field, or the plane of Charon, in that pre-programmed construct that they would follow and build in what Manly Palmer Hall called the great work of the ages. I'm sure they've got that over there across the street in the Masonic Temple. They fully expected that they would arrive at the end of time. They would merge the two pillars between the line of Otto the Great and the papacy, meet in Jerusalem, build the throne, and that the vicar of Christ would sit on that throne as the Lord of the world forever and ever, and controlled the bonded, perpetual servitude of the flesh, and just continue forever harvesting everything we've talked about today. I'm not going to go into it today, but suffice to say, in the last 10 years, the game changed. It all collapsed. And so that whole construct is imploding on them. And the name of the game now is the age of consequences. Everybody on this planet will face themselves. And what you sow, you will reap. And so removing ourselves from the field of battle and the field of commerce and standing as men and women living on the land and being under the flag of peace and moving forward to rebuild and cleanse and clean up this mess is basically what we're doing. And so the motu proprio, the apostolic letter, pretty much put it out there that anybody who now essentially remove the bonded protection of limited liability that all the corporate actors have been standing behind. And so to complete our notice to the world court, the world bodies and the world court basically, we sent a letter that I wrote about 6 weeks ago. We sent it, I guess, a month ago, okay, to the Holy See. The Holy See is the judicial body of the Vatican. And it controls, just like Captain Kirk controls the USS Enterprise, the realm of civil and commercial inferior jurisdiction. And we sent a letter, and it's up on the Pantera website to read, and it basically just said, hey, a year ago we sent to all of your world bodies, the Lord Mayor, the Pope, etc., our notice of our existence. We published a legal adjudicating paper notice, and here it is. If you have a basis of authority to rebut or reject our capacity, state it. If not, it will stand. And so a year later, we sent it to the Holy See and said that we are a court of record, a permanent court and archive of living men and women who have the capacity to stand as reclaiming their estate, settling the claims and liabilities against that estate, and moving into the book of life. And if you have any rebuttal to that, please inform us. If not, we stand as a peer equal to you. We're not at war with you. We're not trying to take you down. Fine, you've been in control for a long time. You are a society. I pulled out of the Vatican II Council, which was in 1960-61, a statement which basically just defined the Vatican and the Holy See as a global society. And that's what we are as well. And as they say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. What's good for them to be a private society and an ecclesiastical body is the same for us. And as I said, where my journey in terms of exploring jurisdiction started with the dominion of Melchizedek, well, at the time I thought, well, maybe dominion of Melchizedek's a good idea. But dominion constitutes a hierarchical control. To me, at this point, where I'm at is being equal with life and all of life, not dominating, not being in dominion, but being equal and holding life as sacred and moving forward from this point forward to use our standing status and capacity to heal the mess that we've made. So the answer to the question of enforcement is that once you take the steps that we've defined as the status correction process and you claim the estate and you prove your life and you do all the steps, and then you issue an international will, which is also recognized, that will be sent to your birth state and to the Holy See, that compels the Secretary of State to sever the attachment between the dead civil body and the living man or woman. That way, our court now will constitute itself as a court of probate, which simply means proof. Probate is based on the Latin word to prove. And so any claims against the estate through the franchise must be brought to a court of probate to be proved. And we're well advanced. We're not complete in constructing, but we will get there relatively soon. In finishing everything up, to document the process of presentment for settlement or entry of claim to the office of the executor of your estate and so forth, if you choose to do this, to prove a claim, to bring that forward, to settle that claim, settle the liabilities, and bring the estate into solvency. So rather than saying we want to be sovereign, simply being solvent, because a solvent has capacity to state a claim. And therefore then you remove yourself from the field of battle. You do not continue to engage with commerce. And back to your question, Mike, basically we must either rescind and revoke things that we did in commerce and or just simply move them over for settlement and closure through the office of the executor. At which point, once we do that, you cannot go back into the field of battle. If you do, because our letter to the Holy See declared this as an international treaty of mutual cognizance, cessation of hostilities, and establishment of peace. So as that, and embodying that as a body politic, as an ecclesia, that if one chooses to take this path, you must remove yourself from the battle. That's why the theme of today is how do you win the game? You stop playing. You remove yourself from the field of battle and cut the ties of the field of commerce. Let the office of executor settle the claims, and if after proper notice, presentment, and other things that we either have in place or we're putting in place, a public actor continues to try and do what they had the ability to do before, which was to act as an agent of the executor. And then they become what you said, an executor de son tort, which means an executor of his own liability. Then the motu propria, the letter from the Pope, kicks in. Now they are taking on the liability. Now we compel them to be the trustee of that constructive trust that they created, to try and bond the estate and get us to act as the trustee that carries the liability and the surety that must debt service and pay with fine or time or otherwise. Now they have the liability, and we can compel them to perform on that. And if they either don't comply or they continue to act as executor de son tort, they're committing war crimes. They're committing crimes against humanity, and thus we can report them to the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS, and or the comptroller of the currency, and or the diocese or the archdiocese under the Holy See to take care of their own. Okay, so then we, you like that. So then, but we have to be very clear that that compulsion or that kind of, you know, inclination to want to, well, I'm going to get that judge or public actor for doing this, this, and this, or they took my house, or they did that, or that guy did this and he harmed me, I'm going to sue him. That totally goes away. You have to learn how to operate wholly at peace and in commerce. And that's an internal process and an external process. As it relates externally, it simply means that if somebody brings an offer to contract against the franchise, that it goes to the office of the executor, who then puts it back to that claimant and says, if you bring a bona fide claim through probate and prove the claim, then we'll settle it. If not, then your offer has no standing, there is no binding to the franchise, and it's null and void on its face.
You just said at peace and in commerce. Could you mean out of commerce?
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I meant, yeah, out of commerce, in peace, at peace, on peace, whichever one you want. Being at peace. Okay, and yes, I didn't mean in commerce. We don't want to be in commerce. Wait, hang on, where's the mic?
Oh, he answered my question already, so I passed it.
Did you mention step number 5? Straight on.
Step 5?
Did you clarify step 5?
Okay, step 4, which was collapsing the trust. Step 5 is going to those islands I mentioned earlier in Tahiti and enjoying coconuts and possibly Polynesian girls. I mean, that's up to, or guys, whatever you like. Step 4 is collapsing the trust. Okay, we have not taken this step yet. We're at the point of I'm just completing the international will, which once somebody does the rest of the steps in, and keep in mind all of this is fully delineated in a course that we've been building for the last year inside Gemstone University, which one becomes a member and then accesses the premium course, which has a donation level and a contract, and we'll get into that in a minute. But basically, if you choose to do that course, all of the remedy or solution relative to, in the past, somebody would achieve sovereignty and most likely have to live either in a cave or a 1983 Ford, you know, that was belching smoke out of the back because they had no commercial paper to operate with and no banking and so forth. That's been part of my journey to make sure that we not only can, you know, get out of that trap, but we can thrive and prosper in a living land of abundance and so forth. And I'm not going to get into that today, other than to say all of the requirements to be in the world but not of it, to have utilities, to have cars and so forth, we have integrated into this course. So once all that's done, the last steps are the international will that I just described, and then getting the QSIP numbers of the primary securitized holding structures of the franchise, the BC, the social, the driver's license, and marriage certificates and any court cases, getting the QSIP numbers, and then sending it along with the book of life, which is where we're going with the status correction course, is a final sealed in our court claim and proof of life that will go to the Bureau of Public Debt, the custodian of alien property, and the probably the Holy See and the Governor General, and basically command them to settle the estate, or liquidate any remaining liabilities, and return reversionary interest to the executor office and for the benefit of the living man. That would be basically step 4, collapsing the trust, merging the title so that you become, or the office of the executor becomes the holder of the legal title and the beneficiary interests.
You were pretty much answering my whole question there, but really my question was, what's the final end-all intent of, you know, all of what you just said, ending up with collapsing the trust and the settling of the accounts and everything? I mean, what's your intention and expectation, I guess I would say also, when you get the Mayor General to do that actually? I mean, are you going to try to end up with some sort of a trade with them, or
well, let me, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
How are you going to exchange for what there was in their system versus what we would use after
right.
that?
In short, the answer is yes. Okay, take some talking about, which I don't know that we will do that today, and we haven't gotten there yet, so part of that is not answerable as of yet. At the same time, there are things going on at the macro scale that are well above and beyond what we're doing on the micro scale. But at that point you have standing, and standing includes the ability to state a claim. The word state is also related to the word stake. You heard of staking a claim on the land? Okay, then we supersede anything in property or equity title, their title insurance system. That's just a liability against the franchise. That we liquidate. It supersedes the land patent, which, as I said, in the land ordinance and the rectilinear township range structure, it still reverts back to the Crown. Okay, we have the ability to claim the land, to state the claim, to stake a claim, and so we can command and compel the reversionary interest to be, because they're not going to pay us in Federal Reserve notes, you know, that's part of the fiction. Okay, but there is a mechanism that I do know is real and exists. It's what people think of as the ephemeral or phantasmical black card and things like that. We have the ability to completely operate privately but settle things publicly properly without returning or traversing back into commerce. I know a lot of those pieces. I don't know all of them. And really, this is for all of us. I think this is a significant part of why we're here this weekend, because a lot of the people who have been part of Pantera up the last, or over the last 3-4 years, have level and degree of understanding of this. We're opening these layers up. At this point, coming here with a group such as yourselves that have significant understanding of commerce, which is very valuable, and understanding a lot more than almost most of the people who are doing the status correction process, we need a team to continue to go on this path, to do the continuing unfolding, revealing, perfecting of a lot of these points. Okay, Pantera also is part of something that is happening at a super macro scale that we can talk about after dinner, that we are very much integrally a part of, and we're going to be graduated at significant and possibly very rapid pace and degree relatively soon. Could be next week, could take a year before that happens. The status correction course and everything that we're talking about now is part and parcel of consolidating our ability as a whole to be able to accelerate and handle that. So, the timing of this event is operating at multiple levels. As I said earlier, the esoteric being on this campus and all of the symbology that is all around us. who you all are as being part of MIC. Now I've brought KEY, and then we can become MOUSE, Mickey Mouse. I mean, that's where it's at. So I've got the key, you've got the Mick, now we're Mickey. All we have to do is find the mouse, okay?
I just want a little clarification. You used the word commerce and stepping out of it. And I just want to know, I mean, to me, the definition of commerce is quite broad. So I just want you to kind of laser in a little bit on what you mean by, because...
Well, ultimately, how I would answer that is simply that the law of the priest has become the law merchant, which has become the Uniform Commercial Code. The Uniform Commercial Code does what? It defines secured interests and debtor-secured party relationship and creates commercial or negotiable paper, which goes back to the commercial or the Negotiable Paper Acts in the U.S. in the 1880s, and the original one under Anne in 1705 when the Hanoverian monarchy took control of first London or England and then the United States. And so it's all about bonding through commercial construct, negotiable paper that are bonded secured interests that are going to operate as the negative or the circulating medium as monetized debt. So debt means or equates to bonded or indentured servitude. And so leaving commerce is simply severing the relationship as the surety to be bonded servants to the crown and so forth.
That correlates to the system of pledging.
Pledging of allegiance.
Right.
Allegiance comes from the word liege or liege lord in the vassal-lord relationship. Pledge of allegiance, allegiance, liege, legal, and so forth. Legal is based on allegiance. You bond yourself through an oath of juris to become a vassal to a liege lord. And that is commerce. Agreeing to be, consenting to be in voluntary servitude to have the privilege to handle their pieces of paper. That's commerce. Now, does that mean that we can't do private business, private enterprise? You know, it is the USS Enterprise that they claim Captain Kirk controls, but on the other hand, it's not the USS Commerce. So we can do private enterprise, we can do private business, and if we need, say, like in the movie The Matrix, an avatar to project into commerce, we can use their commercial entities, an LLC, or other constructs to operate in commerce, but not to be in the world, but not of it. To be the master that controls our projection if we wish to or need to be in commerce, right?
Yesterday you had said, go ahead and bring up the question of RV worldwide and currencies, and you would speak to that.
Let's do that after dinner.
Okay.
Are we coming back after dinner? Okay. Okay, more yerba mate then. No, actually, I'm wide awake and I'm wired after 2 cans of that, but anyways, but dinner in 18 minutes is a good idea.
So just to be clear, this is something that's usable globally?
Say that again. We had squeaky chairs in the front.
This is something that's usable or applicable globally?
Yes.
And is there a process?
Is just, remember, it's a bankrupt corporation. That's all it is. You have a bankrupt corporation that had a central bank, Bank of Issue, that bonded the stock of the cattle, chattel on the plantation. It's the same thing. But the whole global system, if you know the history of the Federal Reserve, that went from 1913 to bankruptcy creditor in 1933 to Bretton Woods, the pegged reserve currency against an exchangeable rate of gold from 1947 to 1971. And then they dropped the gold so that they could infinitely or near infinite expand as a petrodollar, so the consumption of energy became equal to the expansion of the Federal Reserve note. And then the Federal Reserve note had to be held as reserves in every central bank. So every central bank on the planet is a Federal Reserve Bank, okay? So hence, it was done in the United States, but it's a replicated, scaled system that's worldwide. There was only 3 or 4 countries that did not ascribe to that: North Korea, Zimbabwe, Iraq, Iran, and Cuba. Okay, that's why Zimbabwe was allowed to go into the toilet the way it was. That's why North Korea was basically a extension of the Rothschild system, but playing the other side, the bad guy side, and so forth, and why Cuba was attacked and vilified and et cetera, because they did not go into a central bank system. Iraq was collapsed in 2003 and put into that system. Iraq was supposed to be the new global, new world order, global center of the new Babylon. Okay, and that gets to your answer, which we'll get to after the break. And that's why they tried to initiate Albert Pike's nuclear war, World War III, against Iran for the last 10 years, and other forces took place. That's a whole other story. But the answer to your question is, yeah, everything is a corporate construct.
Specifically, the process of removing yourself from the, I guess maybe the so-called system. So if someone was in the EU and they did the same process, it would be generally about the same.
Generally the same. Right now we are tweaking what we've already created for the US to be used for Britain and Canada. And then it would be very easy to do that for like Australia and New Zealand and any of the other Commonwealths. And then from there, we could go to the EU. And, you know, I mean, ultimately, I don't know that Pantera needs to do that because of things that we will talk about after dinner that are going to overtake what we're doing, but it's going to, in effect, merge or step up to what I talked about a few minutes ago. We'll go into that after dinner.
How you doing? I am, I guess, I own a franchise as far as business is concerned. How does that work?
You own a franchise?
I own a franchise.
Like McDonald's or something like that?
Yeah. So how does that fit into what, you know, if I wanted to follow through with your process and procedures?
Okay, well, how do you own that franchise license? Because it's a license. Is it held in your individual name?
No, it's held in an LLC.
Okay, and then who's the member of the LLC?
Me and my wife.
Okay, so then basically you just simply have to move the membership, which is very integrally part of doing the status correction. See, basically it's called own nothing, control everything. Okay, so if you own it, the very last place you want to own anything is in what you would call your personal name, or the all caps name franchise, all cap letter. The second worst place is to own it in an LLC or a corporation that in turn is owned by that individual name. But see, that's transferable interest simply by an exchange, a contractual exchange to an entity. When you do the status correction course, you, through a private contract of exchange, move all of the ownership of everything named in the franchise into the foreign trust or holding trust, the beneficiary of which is the foreign trust. So it's very simple to do. And then you learn how to operate by owning nothing, controlling everything.
I have two quick questions. Number one, who are these elite people? Are they the Trilateral Commission, CFR, you know, who are they? And how many are there? And second question is, what about BC bonds, birth certificate bonds?
Okay. When you say, I'll take the second question first. When you say BC bond, are you talking about the secured party process when we submitted a birth certificate bond with the birth certificate and all the rest of that? It was created as an obligation against the United States by and through the pass-through account of what? The franchise. and underlying that is the exemption and all the rest of that. That's still in commerce. It's still a liability against the franchise. I've done that myself, and in fact, I haven't finished that step. I'm actually going to do that here in the next 30 days. But the bottom line is that if you did a secured party process, you have to terminate that UCC and then reissue, because again, that UCC, as I said earlier, is what? The upper lowercase presumed to be the living man as a secured party against the debtor, all capital letter franchise, right? Okay. As I said earlier, that's not accurate. That's two fictions. There is nothing living in the realm of commerce. So we have to terminate that, and we have to notice the Treasury that we're, and that would be done by the Office of the Executor. That's just a liability obligation against the United States, but attached to the franchise. And see, the rub, or the twist, is that when we did that, we bonded the franchise, but we're still standing as the surety. We've still created a bonded obligation, ultimately that comes back to us. We have to close that out. But it's just like anything else. If you owe, Bank of America $100, or you created a $200 billion bond against the franchise, it's only a matter of scale. Same thing, just a liability that the executor office will inform the claimant, which would be the Federal Reserve, against the corporate United States debtor-creditor to liquidate against the estate. Who are the elite? Bloodlines. Middle management, like bankers and politicians who accepted that role for exchange of what? Money and prestige or whatever. You see what's happening to them if you've been paying attention to the hidden news, bankers being assisted in falling off of buildings and things like that. That's middle management. That's the mesoteric middle level of that esoteric system. The truly esoteric are those bloodlines. Primary to that is what's called a cult called the Sabbateans. Anybody heard of the Sabbateans? Okay. A man was born in Central Europe, a Jew, which is not the original bloodline of the, say, the biblical Hebrews. That's a race called the Khazarians, which was an empire between 700 and 1000 or 1100 AD in Central Europe, who controlled the trade routes between East and West. And they finally split up and disseminated. They went down to Venice and became the oligarchies, or the nobility of Venice, that then went up to the Netherlands in the 1200s and established that royal line and controlled the Dutch East India Company, which controlled Indonesia and South Africa and things like that. And became other lines, the Swiss bankers, and eventually in the 1600s, in 1636, this man named Tzavi, T-Z-A-V-I, Sabbatia, was born, and he declared himself to be the true Messiah that they had all been waiting for. And his dictate, or his mandate, was now the covenant will be fulfilled and the law will be reversed. So where the covenant said in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, that is reversed. Now to fulfill the covenant, you shall kill and you shall steal and everything else. And that is the new law. And that Sabbatean bloodline became the Rothschild consortium of 13 families known as the Schiffs, the Warburgs, the Cohns, the Loebs, and several others that basically in the late 1600s, early 1700s became that 13 family cabal that took over banking, media, government, and so forth, military, to control the world. And then instituted, or really just continued, what people call satanic ritual, bindings or workings to bind the construct of the global population and so forth to their structure. And they infiltrated the Catholic Church, the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt was a paid agent of the Rothschilds, and basically every religion, every major group on the planet, and infiltrated it and bonded themselves to that new covenant to create war and destruction, steal and murder, and do everything that we know is the history of the last 400 years to fulfill the covenant, to become the elite, the chosen ones, to fulfill bloodlines and all the rest of it. There's another bloodline called the Merovingians, who was the Davidic line, or the claimants of what I described earlier, who came into southern France and moved up to what we call Paris, and eventually became the Carolingian line that became the monarchies of Europe, and the bloodlines, and then the prince electors of the Germanic line. Those are the bloodlines and the family lines that became the elite, and then dictated the construct that the middle players said, okay, I'll sell my soul to gain worldly goods and riches and become bankers and politicians and so forth. And the result of it is what you see today, the complete collapse of any moral integrity in any of the world systems. But now it's imploding on itself in what I described earlier as the age of consequence. They will have to face what they've sowed.
How many people are we talking about?
Well, I don't really know, but I've heard it's estimated as, at the core level, 10,000. But, I mean, there's supposedly 13 families, but there's probably multiples of many groups of 13. There's a committee of 300 that is very real. And, you know, different layers and levels, but not very many. 10,000 for a population of 7 billion. All 7 billion or 70 million have to do is stand up and stand and just say no more. Well, now the motu proprio has said, you are not under my protection, my limited liability, you must face the consequences. So you either follow the law or pay the consequences. So we do not have to continue battling in that realm of commerce. We have to just gain standing, status, and capacity and do what we've described here.
Ken, has this solution survived or even experienced any significant challenge yet?
No. I created Pantera in basically 2001 and recorded it as an instrument of acknowledgement without in any way attaching it to public jurisdiction, and recorded it in the state of Washington in February of 2002. I've operated as a corporation sole, and in that awakening I described earlier today of realizing I had everything that we needed jurisdictionally to complete it, the society and so forth. And after dinner we can talk about the basic model that's part of what Gemstone provides as a course for reproducing, because all we want to do is be this environment or this jurisdiction, this body politic, this court of the ecclesia, to create the protections and immunities so you, if you choose, can reproduce that and have the full capacity of doing what you are here to do. The point being, to answer your question, is in the last 10, 11 years, I've never had any problem. I did the Republic stuff. I was supposedly the governor of California and was nationally recognized. I have no doubt that my file in the FBI and so forth is like thick. But I use Gmail. I talk on regular cell phones. I know everything that I do, that we do, including today, is known and recorded, and I have no problem with that because I am standing in the law. Have I actually even totally perfected my status, standing, and capacity? Not quite yet. I expect to be done by the end of August. I'm sort of like the cobbler's children. I've been busy building this for all of us, and I haven't done my last few pieces, but we're focused on that now. But I know that I've done everything correctly because they haven't touched me. I've never had any problem whatsoever. And I also know that I know how to deal with it if it came to me. So if you do it right, and we have had significant successes. We've had civil cases stopped in its tracks. We've had the IRS. I mean, I've been stopping the IRS since 1995. I've had a lot of successes, even in the limited level that I understood. Now I absolutely know that the IRS is like butter to a hot knife, that we can just walk right through it peacefully and properly through the office of the executor to simply receive their claim and settle bona fide proven claims and so forth. So the answer to your question in summary is not a problem.
Somebody I talked to, you know, you get this question a lot, is does it work? And a friend of mine answered, well, do you work? So any process, any kind of template that you use is all going to come down to your way of being, I think. Because it really doesn't matter what paperwork you have out there. I mean, yes, status and standing is important, and your paper can be important, but it's who are you, and do you know?
I totally agree, but I emphatically don't agree about the paperwork, because at this point I'm very clear that you do have to do certain things. You have to notice the world system. And what we've done with our court as a court of record is we're archiving that and making it a proper court. I understand what
agree
you're
with
saying.
that. I agree with that, and let me clarify my point is that you can have a Ferrari, but if you don't know how to drive, it's not going to do you any good.
Right. Yeah, I knew you were saying that. I was going to say that too. You can have no pieces of paper and know who you are and stand on it. Okay, but doing the proper steps and rescinding and severing the contracts and so forth is important. Noticing the system is important. Properly settling the claims against the estate is important. And knowing who you are is absolutely vital if you're doing that. You know, I've already had one guy who should have known better, who was dealing with a court case, who fortunately had not mailed out his inter vivos trust and the other things, who went right, he's in a criminal court case, and he's done convoluted things that have actually helped stop things in its track, but hasn't made it go away. But he actually started throwing commercial paper back at them when he knew 6 months ago he shouldn't do that. And fortunately, he hadn't sent out the inter vivos trust, because I'm quite sure that had he done so, which meant he was under our authority of our court and so forth, under the flag of peace, he was committing an act of war. Okay, so if you don't know that, and you don't understand what that means in basic essential ingredients, you could go to jail, okay? And they won't hesitate to do that. So it's absolutely vital that we do know who we are, which is why we've created Gemstone and also the society. It's a mutual benefit society. That's why the more people who have the kind of level of understanding that many of you do, if you choose to come on board and help build this and grow with what we've got, that we can help others tune up to a level of understanding, you know, and get to the point where we've got people who don't need to spend decades learning this, who could really go through it in, say, 6 months and understand what it means. We're really right there, and so your point is well taken, and with that, we will call it dinner. And why don't we come back at between 7:30 and 8, and we'll just informally keep answering questions.